Picture this. You're on a road trip, the open highway stretching out before you, freedom in every mile. The radio's humming, your friends are laughing, and the world feels alive. But then, something changes. The air grows heavy, the shadows deepen, and suddenly, the road doesn't feel so safe anymore. What if the next turn leads you straight into a nightmare? Tonight, we're diving into 5 disturbing true road trip horror stories that will make you think twice before hitting the highway again. These are real accounts from real people. Stories so chilling, they'll haunt you long after the video ends. Buckle up, turn down the lights, and let's take this terrifying journey together. But be warned, once you start down this road, there's no turning back. Welcome back to the channel where we uncover the darkest corners of the human experience. If you're new here, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell, because you don't want to miss the nightmares we're about to unravel. Tonight's video is a colossus, an ultra-detailed, spine-chilling odyssey into 5 true road trip horror stories that happen to ordinary people on seemingly innocent journeys. We've spent months digging through police reports, obscure, online forums, archived interviews, and first-hand accounts, cross-referencing every detail to ensure these stories are as real as they are terrifying. These aren't campfire tales or urban legends. These are documented events that will make you question what's lurking just beyond your headlights. So, grab a blanket, lock your doors, check your mirrors, and let's hit the road. Starting with a story that proves some highways are haunted by more than just ghosts. Story 1. The hitchhiker's shadow-hour journey begins in the scorching summer of 2014 on the desolate stretches of Nevada's Highway 50, famously known as the loneliest road in America. Sarah Mitchell and Tom Reynolds, a young couple from Seattle, were in the midst of a dream road trip to celebrate their recent engagement. They were 27 and 29, respectively, both teachers with a shared love for adventure. They'd spent months planning this trip, mapping out a route that would take them from the Pacific Northwest to the East Coast and back, stopping at quirky roadside attractions, hidden natural wonders, and greasy spoon diners. Their battered Subaru Outback was packed with camping gear, a cooler full of snacks, and a playlist of indie folk tunes. But on a lonely stretch of Highway 50, in the heart of the Nevada desert, their journey took a turn into a nightmare that would change them forever. It was July 14th, around 8:17 p.m., and the desert was cooling under a starless sky. Sarah was curled up in the passenger seat, her head resting against the window, half asleep after a long day of driving. Tom, behind the wheel, was fighting the hypnotic monotony of the road, his eyes scanning the endless horizon. They hadn't seen another car for hours, just mile after mile of barren sand, twisted Joshua trees, and the occasional abandoned gas station, its pumps rusted and forgotten. The radio, their only companion, was struggling, cutting in and out with bursts of static that sounded almost like voices. Tom adjusted the dial, trying to find a station, when he spotted something up ahead. A figure standing by a mile marker, motionless, thumb outstretched like a hitchhiker. He was tall, at least 6.5 feet, dressed in a tattered denim jacket that hung loosely on his frame, too heavy for the desert heat. A wide-brimmed hat cast his face in shadow, and as the Subaru's headlights swept over him, he didn't move, didn't wave, just stood there, staring directly into the car, his posture unnaturally rigid. Tom later told investigators he felt an immediate, visceral dread, like his body was warning him to keep driving. He wasn't the type to pick up strangers. Too many stories of highway robbers or worse. But this wasn't about caution. It was something deeper, something primal, like the air itself had turned hostile. He pressed the gas, the Subaru humming, as they sped past the figure at 70 miles an hour, the hitchhiker's form blurring in the darkness. Sarah stirred, sensing his tension, and mumbled, "What's wrong?" Tom tried to brush it off, saying it was just some creepy guy on the road, but his hands were trembling on the wheel, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror. And that's when he saw it. The hitchhiker was still there, walking along the shoulder, his strides impossibly long, keeping pace with their car, at 70 miles an hour. Sarah snapped awake, her grogginess replaced by panic as she followed Tom's gaze to the mirror. She screamed, a raw, guttural sound that made Tom swerve, the tires skidding on the asphalt. The hitchhiker was now right behind their car, close enough that they could see the brim of his hat tilting upward, revealing what lay beneath. Sarah described it in a police report as a mask of skin stretched over nothing, with hollow sockets, where eyes should have been, glowing faintly like dying embers in a fire. The sockets weren't empty. They moved, pulsing, as if something inside was watching them. Tom floored the gas, pushing the Subaru to 90, then 100 miles an hour, the engine screaming, the car shaking under the strain. But the figure didn't fall back. It was like he was tethered to them, a shadow that moved with their every turn, his form flickering in and out of the headlights. Now behind, now beside the passenger window, now ahead, standing in the middle of the road, only to vanish as they barreled through him. For 20 agonizing minutes, they tore through the desert, the figure always there, sometimes in the mirror, sometimes loping alongside the passenger window, his hollow gaze locked on Sarah, who was sobbing, clutching Tom's arm, begging him to make it stop. Tom, sweating through his shirt, tried to focus, but the road felt alive, its curves tightening, the mile markers repeating, 37, 37, 37, no matter how far they drove. The radio static surged, spitting out fragments of a voice low and guttural, saying, "You saw me." Sarah later swore she felt breath on her neck, cold and sour, though the back seat was empty. Tom pushed the car to 110, the speedometers, needle trembling. The desert a blur. But the hitchhiker kept pace, his form growing clearer, more solid, as if feeding on their fear. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. The figure vanished. The mirror was empty, the road silent, the static gone. They drove another hour, hearts pounding, until they reached a 24-hour gas station in Ely, Nevada, its neon sign buzzing like a lifeline. Sarah and Tom stumbled into the gas station, their faces ashen, spilling their story to the clerk, a grizzled man in his 60s with a weathered cowboy hat. He listened, his eyes narrowing, and said, "You're not the first to see him out there. You're lucky you kept driving." He offered no details, just poured them coffee and told them to stay until dawn. They reported the incident to the Nye County Sheriff's Office the next morning, but the deputy, a young woman named Officer Carla Ruiz, was skeptical, suggesting they'd been dehydrated or overtired from the road. She noted their story in a report but found no evidence, no footprints in the sand, no hitchhiker matching their description. But here's where it gets chilling. A week later, while recovering in a motel, Sarah couldn't sleep and started digging online. On an obscure forum called Roadside Shadows, she found a post from 2012 by a trucker named Desert Rat 77, describing the exact same figure on Highway 50. Tall, tattered jacket, wide-brimmed hat, hollow eyes that glowed, keeping pace with his rig at 80 miles an hour. The post had 47 replies, some from locals who called him the Shadow of 50, a specter tied to a hitchhiker who vanished in the 1970s after a botched robbery at a nearby diner, his body never found. Others claimed he wasn't a ghost but something older, a desert entity that preys on fear, drawn to the isolation of Highway 50, where the veil between worlds is thin. Sarah and Tom cut their trip short, driving straight back to Seattle in daylight. Sticking to interstates, avoiding any road that felt too empty, they sold the Subaru, unable to shake the feeling that something had latched onto it. Or them. Sarah later admitted she sometimes sees a shadow in her peripheral vision, just out of reach, standing at the edge of parking lots or in the hallway, at night. Tom, a staunch atheist before the trip, started attending church, though he won't say why. If that story sent a shiver down your spine, brace yourself. Our next tale takes us to the misty mountains of Appalachia, where a group of friends learned that some roads don't just lead you astray, they claim you. Story 2. The Endless Lupin. The humid summer of 2018, 4 college friends, Jake Thompson, Mia Alvarez, Ethan Chen, and Lily Harper, set out for a road trip through the wilds of West Virginia. They were juniors at Ohio State University, all in their early 20s, craving a break from the grind of exams, part-time jobs, and cramped dorm rooms. They'd been friends since freshman year, bonded by late-night study sessions and a shared love for adventure. Their plan was to explore the Blue Ridge Mountains, camping under the stars, chasing waterfalls, and making memories to carry into their final year of college. They'd rented a beat-up Ford Econoline van, nicknamed the Beast, packed it, with tents, a propane stove, coolers of beer and snacks, and a Bluetooth speaker blasting Nirvana and Red Hot Chili Peppers. They'd mapped out a route through the back roads of Appalachia, favoring scenic detours over highways. But on a remote stretch of Route 219, deep in the heart of the mountains, they stumbled into a nightmare that would bind them in trauma and silence for the rest of their lives. It was their third night on the road, July 22nd, and they were far from civilization, miles from the nearest town, cell tower, or Wi-Fi signal. The day had been dreary, with intermittent rain turning the roads to sludge, and their GPS had been glitchy, dropping signals and rerouting them in maddening circles. By midnight, they were lost. The van's tires struggling on a muddy, unmarked road they'd taken as a shortcut, hoping to shave an hour off their drive to a campsite near Seneca Rocks. Jake, the de facto leader, was at the wheel, his knuckles white, cursing the map app that had led them here. Mia, navigating from the passenger seat, was flipping through a tattered paper map they'd found in the glove box, its edges yellowed, its print barely legible. Ethan and Lily, sprawled in the yawl, back were passing a bag of Doritos, trying to keep the mood light with bad jokes and a playlist of 90s grunge. But the deeper they drove, the heavier the air felt, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Jake noticed it first. The road kept looping back to the same rusted signpost, its letters spelling no exit in chipped white paint. They'd passed it once, then twice, each time joking about Mia's navigation skills, but by the third loop, the humor was gone. The signpost wasn't just familiar, it was identical, down to the rust stains and the bullet holes pocking its surface. Ethan, trying to stay rational, suggested they'd missed a turn, but Jake shook his head, pointing to the odometer. It hadn't moved. They'd driven for hours, but the mileage was frozen at 472.3, as if the road was refusing to let them progress. Mia checked her phone. No signal, no time update. The screen stuck at 11:11 p.m., the numbers glowing unnaturally bright. Lily, who'd been quiet, her knees pulled to her chest, whispered that she felt watched, like something was pacing them in the trees. The thumping grew louder, shaking the van's frame, and the group fell silent, their flashlights sweeping the fog. Shadows flickered outside, too tall and angular to be human, moving in a way that defied logic, jerky, yet deliberate, like predators stalking prey. Lily, her voice trembling, said she'd seen something in the rearview mirror, a figure, hunched and pale, darting between the trees, its movements like a stop-motion film. Too fast, too wrong. They all turned, their flashlights converging on the mirror, but the figure was gone, leaving only the fog. The thumping stopped, replaced by a silence so heavy it pressed against their eardrums. Jake floored the gas, the van lurching forward, desperate to break the loop, but every turn brought them back to that cursed signpost, its letters now glowing faintly, as if mocking them. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt broken, like a tape stuck on repeat. The group was unraveling, their voices sharp with panic, snapping at each other, when Mia screamed, pointing ahead. There, in the middle of the road, stood a figure. Jake swerved, the van skidding into the mud, its tires spinning, nearly crashing into the trees. When they looked again, the figure was gone, but the engine sputtered and died, plunging them into darkness. Ethan, cursing, popped the hood, his flashlight, trembling, but the battery was fine. The van just wouldn't start. That's when they heard the voices, faint and garbled, like a radio tuned to a dead station, whispering words they couldn't understand, a language that felt ancient, malicious. The voices weren't coming from the woods. They were everywhere. Inside the van, inside their heads, a chorus of overlapping whispers that seemed to know their names. Lily clutched her necklace, a silver cross her grandmother had given her, murmuring a prayer, while Mia scribbled frantically in her journal, her pen tearing the paper, as if writing it down could anchor her to reality. Jake locked the doors, his hands shaking, and they watched as scratches began to appear on the windows, slow and deliberate, like claws testing the glass, forming patterns that looked almost like runes, glowing faintly in the dark. They sat there for hours, or what felt like hours, the air inside the van growing stale, their breaths fogging the windows, the scratches multiplying, covering every pane. Ethan, his bravado gone, clutched a tire iron, whispering that they should fight, but Jake shook his head, his eyes fixed on the runes which seemed to move, crawling like insects. Mia, her journal now a mess of ink and tears, wrote, "It knows us. It's always known us." Lily, her voice barely audible, said she saw the figure again, standing just outside, its faceless head tilted, as if listening. At 4 a.m., the voices stopped. The scratches ceased. The van roared to life, and the road changed. It was straight now, no loops, no signpost, leading them to a gas station 10 miles away, its lights cutting through the dawn like a beacon. They stumbled inside, sobbing, begging the cashier for help. The man, old and weathered, his face lined with years of secrets, didn't seem surprised. He said, "You're lucky. Most don't make it out of the loop." When Jake pressed him, he shook his head and pointed to the highway, muttering, "The ones who watch don't let go easy." The group drove home in silence, the van's radio off, their eyes fixed on the road. They never spoke of that night again, not even to each other. But Jake kept Mia's journal, unable to burn it, though he tried. A year later, he found a Reddit thread in R Paranormal Encounters, buried under newer posts titled Route 219, West Virginia, Anyone Else Trapped? It had 112 comments, drivers from as far back as 1998, describing the same loop, the same signpost, the same faceless figure, the same voices. One user, Lost on 219, claimed their brother vanished on that road in 2003, his car found empty, the windows scratched with runes. Locals call it the road that keeps you, a stretch of Route 219 where something ancient claims those who stray, too far from the light. Some say it's a spirit, tied to the coal mines that once dotted the area, their tunnels collapsing with workers inside. Others believe it's older, a guardian of the mountains, punishing those who trespass. Jake, Mia, Ethan, and Lily graduated, moved to different cities, but they don't meet up anymore. Mia's journal, now in Jake's attic, has one final entry. "It's still out there. It knows my name." That's 2 stories down, and we're only getting deeper into the abyss. If you're feeling the chills, drop a comment with the creepiest road you've ever driven. I want to hear your nightmares. Our next tale takes us to the windswept plains of Nebraska, where a trucker found a town that shouldn't exist, and wished he'd never stopped. Story 3. The Town That Wasn't There. Our third story takes us to the heart of the Midwest, November 10th, 2009. Daniel Harper, a 42-year-old long-haul trucker from Lincoln, Nebraska, was a man of routine and resilience. He'd driven every major highway from Chicago to Cheyenne, logged over 1 million miles in his 18-wheeler, and knew every truck stop, every shortcut, every quirk of the road. He was a loner by choice, comfortable with the hum of his engine and the open sky, priding himself on his instincts, his ability to stay calm in blizzards, breakdowns, or blowouts. But on a stormy night, on a delivery run from Omaha to Denver, Daniel took a detour that led him to a place that defied every rule of the world he knew. A place called Eldridge, a town that shouldn't exist. The storm was a beast, one of the worst Daniel had ever driven through, with winds gusting at 60 miles an hour, rocking his rig like a toy. Visibility was near zero, the rain a solid wall, and his GPS had crapped out an hour earlier, its screen frozen on a blank grid. His CB radio was useless, picking up nothing but static and the occasional burst of garbled voices, like someone trying to break through. Daniel was tired, his eyes burning, but he had a deadline, 500 miles to Denver by morning. When he saw the sign for Eldridge, he figured it was a small farming town, maybe with a 24-hour diner or a gas station where he could wait out the storm. The road was narrow, barely paved, its edges crumbling into the mud. But Daniel was desperate. He turned, his headlights slicing through the rain, expecting to see lights in the distance, a flicker of civilization. Instead, he found a town, silent, dark, and wrong in every way. Daniel parked his rig in what he thought was the town square, the rain hammering his windshield, the wipers struggling to keep up. He stepped out, his boots sinking into the mud, and called for help, his voice echoing off the buildings, swallowed by the silence. The air felt thick, like he was breathing through a wet cloth, and his flashlight barely cut through the darkness, its beam dimming as if the town was draining. He noticed something else. His radio was dead, his phone was dead. Even his analog watch, a gift from his wife, had stopped at 2:13 a.m., the second hand twitching but not moving. The town was too perfect, too still, the buildings untouched. By time, their windows black, reflecting nothing. He walked toward the church, the only building with any light, drawn to it despite every instinct screaming at him to run. That's when he saw them, shapes moving inside, tall and thin, their movements jerky, like marionettes controlled by unseen hands. They weren't human, their limbs bent at impossible angles, their heads twitching as if scanning the dark, their bodies shimmering like heat haze. Daniel didn't wait to see more. He sprinted back to his truck, his boots slipping in the mud, the chant following him, growing louder, closer, vibrating in his chest. He locked himself in the cab, his hands shaking as he tried the ignition, but the engine wouldn't turn over. No click, no sputter, just silence. Panic clawed at him as the shapes emerged from the church, gliding toward the truck, their forms flickering in the lightning, 7 or 8 feet tall, their bodies thin as reeds, with no faces, just smooth, featureless ovals that seemed to absorb the light. One pressed its face against the driver's side window, leaving a smear of something black and oily, like tar, its surface bubbling as if alive. Another circled the rig, dragging something along the ground, a sound like metal scraping bone, sharp and rhythmic. Daniel clutched his St. Christopher medal, whispering prayers he hadn't said since his wife's funeral, his eyes fixed on the smear, which seemed to move, crawling across the glass. Daniel sat there for hours, or what felt like hours, the storm, raging outside, the shapes circling, their movements methodical, like predators toying with prey. He didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe too loudly, convinced they could hear his heartbeat. He saw things in the dark, faces in the windows, not the shapes, but people, or what looked like people, their eyes hollow, their mouths open in silent screams. At dawn, the storm broke, and the shapes vanished, melting into the morning mist. The truck started on the first try, and Daniel floored it, not looking back, the town receding in his mirrors, its buildings fading into the haze, as if they'd never been there. When he reached the highway, he pulled over, shaking, and checked his map. There was no Eldridge, not on the map, not in any record he could find online, not even in the state's historical archives. He called his dispatcher, a gruff man named Hank, who laughed it off, saying he must have misread a sign in the storm. But Daniel wasn't convinced. He scoured trucking forums, Overdrive, the Truckers' Lounge, and found others who'd seen it, a ghost town on that same route, always in storms, always empty, except for them. One user, Midnight Hauler, claimed Eldridge was a thin place, a spot where the veil between worlds is weak and something on the other side is hungry. Another, Plains Drifter, said their cousin disappeared near. There in 1995, their rig found empty, the windows smeared with black. Daniel quit trucking a month later, unable to shake the feeling that something had followed him out of Eldridge. He moved to Florida, as far from the plains as he could get, and took a job as a mechanic, refusing to drive anything bigger than a pickup. He still checks his locks every night, still wakes up to the sound of scraping in his dreams, still sees the smear on the window when he closes his eyes. We're halfway through our journey, and the road's only getting darker. If these stories are hitting you, smash that like button. It helps us keep the nightmares coming. Our next story takes us to the Pacific Northwest, where a road trip turned into a deadly game of cat and mouse, with stakes higher than survival. Story 4. The Hunter's Game. In June 2016, 3 friends, Mark Sullivan, Rachel Kim, and Alex Navarro, set out for a weekend of camping in Washington's Olympic National Forest. They were all 25, born and raised in Seattle, with a deep love for the outdoors. Mark, a former Eagle Scout, was the group's leader, a survivalist who could start a fire in a downpour. Rachel, a nurse, was the planner, meticulous with supplies and first aid kits. Alex, a graphic designer with a penchant for bad puns, was the glue, keeping morale high. They were seasoned hikers, with years of experience in the Cascades and Olympics, prepared for anything: bears, cougars, sudden storms. Their plan was to drive deep into the forest, camp for 2 nights at a remote site near Lake Cushman, and head home, their phones full of photos and stories. But on a treacherous logging road, they became prey in a game they didn't know they were playing, hunted by something or someone who knew the forest better than they ever could. It was late afternoon on June 17th, and the group was running. Behind, the sun dipping below the trees, casting long shadows across the road. They'd chosen a logging road as a shortcut, recommended by an outdated guidebook Mark had found at a thrift store. The map said it was passable, but it was a nightmare. Narrow, overgrown, slick with mud from a week of rain, the ruts deep enough to swallow a tire. They were halfway through, the forest suffocatingly close, when they heard a loud crack. The forerunner lurched, then stopped, its front end tilting. Mark, cursing, climbed out to check. They'd snapped an axle, the metal twisted, a death sentence, for a vehicle this far from help. Stranded, they decided to stay put, hoping another car might pass, though they hadn't seen one in hours. They activated the satellite phone, but it couldn't connect, its screen flashing, no signal. As night fell, the forest came alive, not with the usual sounds of owls or rustling leaves, but with something else. Something watching them. Mark, ever the leader, was the first to notice the carvings. Fresh arrows etched into the trees, their bark peeled back, the sap still dripping, pointing into the forest, away from the road. They hadn't been there when they'd stopped, and they weren't random. Someone had made them recently, with a blade sharp enough to cut through wood like butter. Rachel, her nurse's instincts kicking in, heard the footsteps next, heavy and deliberate, circling the forerunner at a distance, just beyond the reach of their lights. She whispered to Mark, her voice steady but strained, that it wasn't an animal. Animals don't move like that. Don't pause to watch. Alex, trying to keep things light, suggested it was a prankster, maybe local kids messing with tourists. But his voice cracked when they saw it. A tripwire stretched across the road, glinting in their headlights. It was taut, professional, rigged between two trees, its metal thin but strong, designed to catch something. Or someone. This wasn't a prank. This was a trap. The group locked the doors, their flashlights trembling as they scanned the forest. The trees seeming to lean closer, their branches clawing at the forerunner's roof. The footsteps grew closer, now accompanied by that whistle, slow and deliberate, circling tighter, as if hurting them. Mark spotted a figure in the trees, barely visible. A man, or something like one, wearing a hooded jacket, its fabric tattered, holding what looked like a rifle, its barrel glinting. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, watching, his face hidden in shadow, his posture unnaturally still. Rachel, her breath hitching, whispered that she'd seen another figure, on the opposite side of the road, moving in sync, like they were coordinating, their steps silent but deliberate. Alex, his humor gone, clutched a tire iron, muttering about fighting back. But the whistling stopped, and all hell broke loose. Rocks rained down on the forerunner, smashing the windshield, denting the hood, the impacts precise, aimed to terrify. Glass flew, cutting Rachel's arm, and the group screamed, ducking as the barrage continued, relentless, the rocks seeming to come from every direction, as if the forest itself was attacking. The attack lasted minutes, or maybe longer. Time blurred in their panic. They barricaded themselves in the forerunner, using sleeping bags to block the broken windows, their flashlights flickering as the batteries died. The rocks stopped, but the footsteps didn't, circling closer, now joined by a new sound. Metal dragging, on metal, like a machete being sharpened, slow and deliberate, echoing through the trees. Mark, bleeding from a shard of glass in his shoulder, whispered that they couldn't stay. They'd be sitting ducks until morning. But Rachel, her arm bandaged with a torn shirt, pointed out the tripwire. Leaving the car meant risking whatever. Had said it, and the carving suggested a path they weren't meant to follow. They stayed, huddling together, their breaths shallow, praying for dawn. At first light, the footsteps faded, the forest falling silent, the whistle gone. They hiked 10 miles to a ranger station, battered, bleeding, their nerves shredded. The forerunner abandoned, its keys still in the ignition. The rangers found their forerunner, but the tripwire was gone, the carvings erased, as if the forest had swallowed the evidence. A police report, obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request, documented the incident, noting unknown assailants and ritualistic markings on the vehicle, but no suspects were identified. The report mentioned similar attacks in the area. Hikers stalked, vehicles vandalized, always on that logging road, always at night, dating back to the 1980s. Some locals believe it's a lone hunter, a recluse who sees outsiders as intruders on his land. His trap's a warning to stay away. Others whisper about a cult, a group that's lived in the forest for generations, guarding secrets tied to the land, old mines, forgotten graves, or something darker. Mark, Rachel, and Alex never returned to the woods, and they don't talk about that night, not even with each other. But Rachel kept one memento, a photo she'd taken of the carvings before they fled. Their shapes burned into her memory, a reminder of the hunter who let them go, or chose not to finish the game. She keeps it in a locked drawer, alongside a map she'll never use again. One story left, and it's the darkest yet. If you've made it this far, you're braver than most. Drop a comment if you're still with me, and let's finish this journey with a tale that proves some roads lead straight to the edge of reality and beyond. Story 5. The Road to Nowhere, our final story, takes us to the rugged coast of Oregon, October 23rd, 2020. Emily Carter, a 29-year-old freelance photographer from Portland, was on a solo road trip to capture the raw, untamed beauty of Highway 101. She was a wanderer at heart, with a portfolio of moody landscapes and a beat-up Jeep Wrangler that had carried her from the redwoods to the Canadian border. She'd driven this route before, knew its curves, its cliffs, its quirks, and loved the solitude of the open road, the way it made her feel alive. Her plan was to shoot the coastline at dawn, chasing the perfect light for a gallery submission, camping in her Jeep between stops. But one night, in a tunnel called Devil's Hollow, she encountered something that shattered her sense of safety and her understanding of the world. It was just after 11 p.m., and Emily was exhausted, her eyes burning from hours of driving, her thermos of coffee long empty. The tunnel was a straight shot, maybe a quarter-mile long, carved into the cliffs above the Pacific, its walls damp with seepage. She'd passed through it before without issue, though she'd always felt a twinge of unease. Something about the way the light died inside, the way sounds echoed wrong. This time, halfway in, her Jeep stalled. The engine died, the headlights flickered, then went out, plunging her into total darkness, the kind that presses against your eyes. She tried her phone. No signal, no light, the screen frozen on a photo she didn't remember taking. The tunnel's entrance, a shadow standing just inside. That's when she heard it. A scraping sound, like metal dragging on stone, coming from the tunnel's walls. Slow and deliberate, moving closer, circling her. Emily froze, her breath hitching, the flashlight trembling in her hand, its beam weakening, as if the tunnel was draining it. The scraping stopped, replaced by a voice. Low, guttural, speaking words she couldn't understand. A language that felt older than time, its syllables sharp, cutting into her mind. It wasn't coming from the tunnel. It was inside the Jeep. Right behind her, so close she felt the air shift, cold and sour like decay. She whipped around, the flashlight sweeping the back seat, but it was empty. Her camera, her backpack, a crumpled flannel, nothing else. Then, her beam caught something in the rearview mirror, a face, pale and eyeless, pressed against the back window, its lips curling into a smile that was too wide, too wrong, showing teeth that glinted like obsidian, jagged and uneven. The face wasn't still. It moved, its skin rippling, as if something beneath was trying to break through. Emily's Jeep roared to life, the headlights snapping on, blinding her for a moment, the tunnel's walls seeming to pulse, the handprints glowing, brighter as if alive. She floored it, the tires screeching as she sped out of the tunnel, the face in the mirror vanishing, the voice gone, the scraping silenced. She didn't stop until she reached a motel 20 miles away, its neon sign flickering like a lifeline, the words, "Vacancy," glowing red. She burst into the lobby, sobbing, spilling her story to the night clerk, a weathered man in his 70s with tired eyes and a limp, his name tag reading, Earl. He didn't laugh or call her crazy. He just said, "You're not the first. Devils. Hollow takes what it wants." When Emily pressed him, he clammed up, but he gave her a look that said she was lucky to be alive, his hands trembling as he poured her coffee. She spent the night in the motel, doors locked, lights on, unable to sleep. The image of that face burned into her mind, the voice echoing in her ears. The next day, Emily scoured the internet, desperate for answers, her hands shaking as she typed. She found forums, Reddit, X, obscure paranormal sites like the Hollow Watch, where drivers shared similar stories about Devil's Hollow. Voices, handprints, faces that appeared and vanished, always at night, always in the tunnel. A post from 2017 included a police report about a missing driver, a 34-year-old man named Caleb Ruiz, whose car was found abandoned in the tunnel, the interior covered in red handprints, no body ever recovered, the substance unidentifiable by forensics. Another post from 2013 quoted a Coast Salish elder who called the tunnel a bad place, a gateway sealed by her ancestors, now open, hungry. Locals have names for it. The Hollow Man, the Watcher, the Thing that Waits. Some tie it to a 1950s crash, a bus carrying migrant workers that plunged off the cliff above the tunnel, killing 27, their bodies never fully accounted for. The wreckage, left in the ocean. Others say it's older. a presence that's haunted the coast for centuries, a predator drawn to those who drive alone. Its hunger endless. Emily sold her Jeep, deleted her photos, and moved inland to Boise, vowing never to touch Highway 101 again. But she kept one thing: her camera's memory card, hidden in a lockbox, a reminder that what she saw was real, and still out there, waiting. And there you have it. 5 true road trip horror stories that prove the open road can be a gateway to terror. From the shadow of 50, stalking the deserts of Nevada, to the endless loop of Route 219, where the mountains keep their secrets. From the ghost town of Eldridge, where the veil is thin, to the hunter's deadly game in the Olympic rainforest. And finally, to Devil's Hollow, where something ancient waits in the dark. These stories remind us that some journeys take you places you can't come back from. These aren't just tales. They're warnings, etched in the accounts of those who survived, and the silence of those who didn't. If these stories chilled you to the bone, hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more deep dives into the unknown. Got a creepy road trip story of your own? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and the best might make it into our next video. Until next time, stay safe out there, stick to the main roads, and maybe check your mirrors. Good night.